What's going on, everybody? So we're hearing a lot about civil unrest, terrorist attacks, civil wars, all sorts of stuff. So let's dig a little deeper. What exactly are the chances of a civil war happening in the United States, say, in the next few years? If you look at it as 2025 kind of comes to its conclusion, we're now headed into we're in the middle of Q3 right now, and we're headed into Q4. There's a lot of things we need to be looking at. One of them being the fractured political environment that we're seeing here in the United States. Now, I got a couple of articles here I wanted to talk about. A recent poll, Rasmussen reports from September 2025, showed 41% of Americans in general, that's left, right, Democrat, Republican, fear that civil unrest could spiral into something worse. Now, the CSIS, which is an analytic group, actually warns of low but non-zero risk of an insurgency-style violence and then counter-violence. They said things have gotten to the point where what we saw in 2020, where basically Antifa and BLM burned cities down for 8 months, and then the right had a riot in January 6th, right? And everyone's like, oh, the riot, it's an insurrection. But yeah, you were burning cities down for 8 months, and that was peaceful protest. Now they're afraid it's gotten to the point that now the right is like, fuck it. Excuse my French. So now there's fear that a lot of the right is actually preparing for that. And there's a belief that a lot of the folks on the right tend to lean toward military veterans and whatnot, so they would be very competent at running an insurgency. There's been a lot of polarization, and so a civil war would not be geographical the way one would think, like the American Civil War. That was actually very unusual for a civil war, right? You had very clear delineations between these states and that state. It was almost like two little countries fighting within a big country. Each had their own government, their own president, their own front line, their own back line, the home front, the whole 9 yards. This would not be that way. They said it would be a lot more along the lines of looking at the county level political map, right? Because when you look at the state map, you're like, oh, California's blue, right? Because it went to Kamala Harris. But if you go down to the county level, it's like you have blueberries, you have LA, San Francisco, certain cities are very blue, and then the rest of the state would be red. And you would have those insurgencies go back and forth, where once it would become a tit for tat. So Antifa attacks, I don't know, some pro Charlie Kirk event, and then a militia group on the right says, oh, is that what you're going to do? So the next time Antifa has whatever protest, there's a car bomb. And it's going to start becoming like that. They said it would look a lot more like the IRA in the 70s and 80s fighting against the English, where there was a lot of bombs, there was a lot of random hits, and very targeted attacks. So a few of the points that were brought up when I read these articles, so the polarization and political divides, right? 80% of Americans, according to Pew Research, view the other political side as a threat to democracy. That's across the board. The FBI reports from an OSINT 15% rise in militia recruitment that they know of. And they cite like the Proud Boys and the Patriot Front. I keep calling them the Patriot Boys. I mixed the two up. But also with Antifa and BLM. They don't mention them as much because apparently they're not as well organized, which is what really scares people, is that the Proud Boys and Patriot Front actually can organize very well. So interesting. They also said economic triggers could be a problem. For instance, if gas suddenly goes, oil goes from its 62 as of yesterday a barrel, goes to 130 a barrel. Right now you're looking at $5 a gallon gas in the red states, much less like California, be $10 a gallon. The cost will then go into food, just like it did during COVID. You're going to see a major issue there. People still don't trust elections. 30% of one of the Gallup polls said that they don't believe the last election, and 40% didn't believe the election before that. So there's a mistrust in the society, there's a mistrust in the institutions, and social media is being bombarded. They're very targeted social media attacks meant to manipulate and cause mischief. I've said before, I think the kid who shot Charlie Kirk, I don't think he's the only one involved. But guys like him, guys like the trans shooter in the Catholic school who shot up the kids, these guys are being targeted by online bots and online activists who are like, this guy's on the edge, let's provoke him. And I'm using two left-leaning examples. I'm sure they're right-leaning examples too. They're looking for people who are unstable, and they're bombarding their feed with manipulative posts to make them act. So they say it's a lone wolf. It's not a lone wolf. It's actually, in my opinion, and from what I'm seeing here, kind of a psyop. It's not going to be like the 1860s where you're going to have North and South. It's going to be rural versus urban. Suburban is going to vary depending on where you are. You could have counties that don't agree with each other. The likelihood of a full-scale civil war, according to CSIS, is less than 5%. But insurgency, including sabotage and targeted attacks, which we already saw with Charlie Kirk and we saw with the attempt on Trump, are now registering in the 20 percentile. So think about it. There's a 1 in 5 chance someone's going to go out and commit an act of political aggression. And it's not so much on policy, it's now on identity. And not identity like I'm trans or I'm not trans. I'm talking like I identify as a liberal, I identify as a conservative, I identify as a MAGA, I identify as an Antifa, those kind of identities. So it's going to be really interesting seeing what happens. So there are a couple of things we can do, right? Things we need to watch for. One, watch for escalating protests. 2020, between COVID and the protests, it was a real shit show. But we saw a template for that. Look for these sudden protests. There's going to be a No Kings protest coming this Saturday, believe it or not. Trump apparently negotiates a peace treaty in Israel and winds up figuring out how to pay the troops on October 15th, but they're going to have a No King's Day protest because they have nothing else to do. Watch for those to get possibly violent. I don't think they will right now, but those are the kind of things you're going to see. Protests, then they start to escalate. There's also a page called Recorded Future. I don't know if that's, I'm saying it right. It's an open source intel, an OSINT, and they try to track different types of militias on both the left and the right, basically any non-official military group. But, also monitor economic things, right? Weed embargoes, oil embargoes, China threatening to stop precious or rare earth minerals, so electronics will become expensive. But the food, fuel, water, clothing, the stuff we need, right? We don't need an iPhone technically, but we need the other stuff. Watch for those price spikes because that can cause a lot of tension and people will start to lash out. A few things, and also grid disruptions, right? So a few things we can do, and I'll put references for a lot of this stuff if you guys want to do a deeper dive. A few things you guys can do if you are traveling, right? Or you got to go to work. Have a good get-home bag. I've demonstrated several layouts of different types of get-home bags. Have some cash, preferably in smaller denominations, on your person, in your wallet, at the house. Have it somewhere. If you have a safe deposit box downtown near your office and you live somewhere else, you can use that to keep some important valuables. Have some food with you, a good first aid kit in your vehicle. If you're commuting by train or bus, you may want to know routes to walk home. If you can get a bicycle to work and have it locked downstairs in the parking garage in the basement so you have alternate transportation. If there's a power outage or a riot, you could get on your bike and get home. That gives you a lot of options, and a lot of companies will allow you to leave a bike at the bike rack in the office building. You just have to lock it down so somebody doesn't steal it. Take some steps, and most importantly, awareness. We use situational awareness a lot. We kind of throw that word around. But in reality, pay attention to trends. You start seeing escalating violence. You start seeing attack and counterattack. You start seeing protests get out of hand, like they've started to again. Those are signs. And remember, we're going into an election year, midterm, and the incumbent party is doing better than they expected. There's a high possibility that in order to create dissension, you're going to see more trolls on the internet. One of the reports I read said up to 40% of the people who comment on videos on like TikTok and X are bots that are being like one guy manipulating 30 phones, and they're just knocking out the same comments on different places just to rile people up. So watch what's happening, pay attention to the trends. I'll try and stay on top of them. I will give you guys some links that you can go investigate yourselves. In the meantime, be good, be safe, do the basics, have your vehicle and kit ready if you need to go on foot, if you need to go on bike. Know different ways to get home, different ways to get to safe spaces so you guys can get through any hardship. That's what it's all about. We'll see you on the next video. You guys take care.